Question: who is the most powerful hero in Flesh and Blood? There are only 2 appropriate responses to this question. The first goes something like,
I think it's Starvo. I don't know why, but he's got like 1,000,000 living legend points.
and the second appropriate response goes something like,
D11, dominate, D11, dominate, go again.
It's Starvo, no doubt.
anyone that answers this question differently is either dead wrong or lying to themselves. And as if there was any room for a debate on the topic, the conversation was definitively silenced at the first ever official Living Legend format side event at the 2nd World Championship on November 19th. This event was completely one of a kind. It will go down in history as the only Living Legend format event that had 0 adjustments in terms of card legality.
The intention is that there will, or for the Barcelona event at least, there will be no ban list.
Nothing's banned, it's just Wild West, just do crazy shit.
Every iteration of Flesh and Blood's most powerful decks were on display, brawling it out for the claim of the most busted deck in Flesh and Blood. The results speak for themselves. For many, this image brought back painful memories of Starvo's short-lived reign within Classic Constructed. His story isn't a beautiful tale about how a beloved hero reached Living Legend after a healthy career in Classic Constructed. No, no, no. This is the story of Flesh and Blood's most prominent design mistake and the carnage he left in his path on the way to Living Legend. Get ready. This is the story of Bravo, star of the show's journey to Living Legend. If you're unfamiliar with Flesh and Blood's Living Legend system, there's a timestamped link to the previous video in this series in the description below. Definitely watch that section first, or the whole video if you haven't already. As always, before we go any further, I just want to say that this video was a huge effort, and the best way to show that you enjoyed it and want to see more of these is to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment down below. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Now, let's rewind back to the start of 2022. The Tales of Aria competitive season had just concluded, with Briar emerging as the standout deck, winning 60% of all national championships, and resulted in a banned and suspended announcement that significantly nerfed the deck. Players could now take some time off from competitive events and look forward to a new metagame, with a nerfed Briar and the release of Everfest on February 2nd. Everfest was a very unique set considering the game's history at the time. It was the 2nd ever supplemental set, meaning it was only designed to inject new cards into constructed formats. The set was advertised to provide new cards for every hero in the game, which consisted of 23 Blitz heroes and 14 Classic Constructed heroes at the time. The only previous supplemental set, Crucible of War, introduced new young heroes for Blitz, but no adult heroes for Classic Constructed. So the player base had no reason to suspect the latter was coming in Everfest. On January 24th, it came as quite the surprise when on the first day of Everfest spoiler season, Bravo, star of the show, was revealed. Bravo's showstopper had been reborn as an elemental guardian with the essence of ice, earth, and lightning, and a hero ability that reads, at the start of your turn, you may reveal an earth, an ice, and a lightning card from your hand. If you do, the next attack action card with cost 3 or greater you play this turn gains +2, dominate, and go again. No one really knew what to make of Bravo star of the show at first. It was a design unlike any hero in the game, so most of the community was cautious to give any strong opinion on it before testing.
I think it's gonna be good. How good? I don't know.
He has so much potential. Like we couldn't possibly scratch the surface of like what's possible with him.
This hero seems busted to me, and maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
I think he's very good. I'd be happy for next week to turn around and say he's not as good as I thought.
And to be clear, I don't know where Bravo's going to end up.
It's hard to wrap your head around that hero ability. It seems a bit funky.
You being able to pull off that ability is going to be very difficult. Like, the stars are really going to have to align.
The more time I spend with it, the more I'm convinced that, right, this is busted and a mistake.
His ability, how consistent it will be, I have no clue.
I think he's not going to be as bonkers as some people are saying he's going to be, so I wouldn't worry too much about like having him dominate.
I could be wrong on this one, but I do think a nice solid 3-star.
A we kind of in agreement to put it down here because we don't really know yet?
Yeah, we don't know.
Right, well,
The 2 points that everyone could agree on was that 1, Starvo's card pool was a huge advantage.
I think the toolbox for this hero is just absolutely unreal.
It is going to have access to the largest card pool in the game.
He now has the largest card pool in the game. He has the largest card pool of anybody.
There has to be a deck for him somewhere. I mean, his card pool is just massive.
So he's got access to all the generic elementals now, all the guardian elementals.
You could build old him, but with crippling crush.
The sandbox for Bravo Star of the Show is basically bigger than everyone else. There's the access to so many different threats and tools that you have is tremendous.
Being an elemental guardian with all essences gave Starvo access to more cards than any other hero. He could use 27 elemental cards, 87 guardian cards, 19 elemental cards, 32 ice cards, 31 earth cards, 31 lightning cards, and 272 generic cards. Compare that to a character like Dash, who before Bright Lights had access to 68 mechanologist cards and 272 generic cards. The second point was that the hero ability, when activated, was incredibly powerful.
I mean, if he ever lands that hero power, you're like really upset as the opponent, right?
Like, if he's pulling it off, even a few times in the game, it's so devastating and powerful.
Being able to do it a couple of times a game is just too much for the perhaps the other unrefined decks to take.
You're going to play games against this guy, and there's going to be people that draw 3 hands in a row that hit, and you're going to cry about it.
He's going to high roll, and that's what's going to get, you know, not get you into the top 8, but it will help you get into the top 8.
His effect does look like you could possibly do that if people figure it out.
Just like with most new heroes, players figured it would take weeks to figure out where Starvo would land in the metagame.
And I don't think he's going to be successful early. I think he's going to be successful at the end of Progress season.
I don't think he's going to immediately come into the meta and crush people.
There's only a few cards that I'm really excited about, and like we'll have to see how it plays out.
That's going to take time to sort through.
This is going to take a while to figure out Bravo Star of the Show.
But of course, the community got their answer far sooner than expected. The day after Everfest's release, Out of the Box Gaming in North Carolina held a classic constructed event with some very generous prize support. Somewhere between 30 and 40 players eager to test out the new cards from Everfest attended. One player, known as Matt W., was reportedly the only one brave enough to bring the newest hero to this event. The rest of the field was not ready for what he had in store.
Bravo's ability, Captain Planet. I start lightning. We will Captain Planet. With our powers combined, we summon Captain Planet. 13 Dominate Go again. Captain Planet again. So it's 11 Dominate Go again. 13 Dominate Go again. Earth, Ice, Lightning, Oaken 11 Dominate Go again. Ice, Earth, Lightning, Captain Planet. Powers combined, make Captain Planet. 9 Dominate Go again. You are Captain Planet. Here we go, boys. Kappa 1, 2, 3 in the chat. Do it again, baby.
I just wanted to throw together a Bravo deck that was different than what everyone else was doing. I had a testing group put together a couple lists. They were all playing like a traditional Guardian plan, but I took it in a completely opposite direction where the deck fuses as much as possible. In the initial testing, I was just amazed how easy the deck was to play and how fast it could kill an opponent. And then once you start throwing in cards like Oaken Old and Crippling Crush, you realize how disruptive the deck is.
Over 6 rounds of Swiss and then a cut to top 8, Matt W went undefeated with a perfect 9-0 finish. Immediately after this event, word of Matt W's Captain Planet build and his 9-0 finish spread like wildfire. Since this was an unofficial event, no Living Legend points were awarded to Starvo, and it also meant that the deck list wasn't posted on fabtcg.com. But because the event was streamed, the community was able to review the video and recreate the deck list, which quickly began to circulate online. Most notably, there was a ChannelFireball article from US National Champion Tark Patel that analyzed the exact deck list. And a few days later, ChannelFireball uploaded a gameplay video with Tark and Rob Seigel showcasing the deck.
So wow, what an explosive deck from start of the show. You know, I wrote a little bit about the card in the preview season. how I thought it would impact the meta, but nowhere did I believe that it would have such an impact so quickly.
It's definitely a really strong showing a couple weeks into a brand new meta, right? The set just came out.
Word was officially out that Captain Planet was going to be the new deck to beat in the upcoming competitive season. Let's take a deep dive into this deck list to help illustrate why it was so strong. Matt W's Captain Planet deck was an aggressive build with a very linear game plan. It was designed to assemble the 3 elements in your hand to activate Starvo's ability as consistently as possible. The ideal turn was to reveal for the hero ability activation, swing with the hardest hitting attack you have with +2 dominate and go again, pitching a blue, follow it up with Winter's Wail, pitching a blue ice card to threaten the frostbite on hit, and then arsenal your last card. It was a potent mix of high damage, evasion, and disruption that was extremely effective in every matchup. Starvo's standard equipment suite consisted of Ironhide Boots, Crater Fist, Fendel Spring Tunic, and Crown of Seeds. Ironhide Boots and Crater Fist only contributed to blocking. The real MVP of the equipment was Crown of Seeds combined with Tunic. For 1 resource, Crown of Seeds allowed Starvo to put his arsenal on the bottom of his deck and draw a card at instant speed. This was perfect for helping Starvo dig through his deck to find 1 of each element before the start of his turn. Oh, and on top of that, it prevented 1 damage. Tunic existed mostly to provide the resource to use Crown of Seeds without pitching a card from hand. Starvo's weapon of choice, Winter's Wail, swung for 4 damage and threatened a frostbite on hit if an ice card was pitched to activate it. Not only that, it was a one-handed weapon, which allowed Starvo use of offhand equipment like Rampart of the Ram's Head, which was fantastic at soaking up damage alongside Crown of Seeds. For the elemental cards, the deck ran 17 lightning cards, 14 of which were blue and existed almost entirely to activate Starvo and then be pitched away. The only exceptions were the 3 red lightning surges, which were just overall above rate attacks when played from Arsenal. The deck also ran 17 ice cards, 14 of which were blue and also existed to activate Starvo and then be pitched for Winter's Wail. The 3 red Frostfang served as solid attacks on turns without a Starvo activation. For Earth cards, the deck ran 18, all of which were 3-cost attacks. The 9 blues could be used to activate Starvo, pitch for the attack, or be the actual Starvo attack. The 6 reds and 3 yellows were the ideal targets for the Starvo activation as they traded pitch value for higher power. The 3 legendary pulse cards each counted towards 2 of the 3 elements, which greatly increased the chance of activating Starvo each turn. They also had very powerful effects on their own that were commonly played out. Outside of Earth attack actions, the deck ran only Oakenold and Crippling Crush as the other possible targets for the Starvo ability. These were easily the 2 highest priority targets for the Starvo ability, as they were both more than likely ripping 2 cards from hand. Awakening and Art of War were 2 unique cards in the deck. Awakening had the potential to severely punish the opponent for being ahead on life. For a shockingly small cost, it allowed Starvo to pull off ridiculously powerful pivot turns.
Creating 18 Seismic Surges, a free Crippling Crush for 13 Dominate Gillian.
Art of War, like Crown of Seeds, was another way for the deck to cycle cards to find the 3 elements before the start of the turn. Filling out the rest of the list was a small defense reaction package of 3 Sync Belows and 3 blue Staunch Responses. Considering this deck was played in a competitive setting the day after Everfest hit shelves, it was incredibly ahead of its time, and played a huge part in influencing the upcoming metagame. The first official Classic Constructed event of the Everfest meta was the Battle Hardened at SCGCon Philadelphia on February 12th. 112 players came out for the inaugural competitive event of the season, and leading the pack as the most represented deck was Starvo, occupying 20% of the meta. After 6 rounds, Starvo secured 5 spots in the top 8. After defeating 2 other Starvos and Daniel Rutkowski's Chain in the finals, Starvo had won his first official premier open play event in the hands of Charles Dunn. He was officially on the leaderboard with 30 points.
I think the new Bravo is just
really, really strong. You know, you bring it to the fusion, you just do a ton of damage, and it feels like it has a lot of great matchups across the board.
Charles's deck was a slight variation on Matt W's Captain Planet build.
We saw the list come out from another tournament that kind of got leaked. We saw like somebody playing it on a stream.
Captain Planet.
And this is kind of be the default version out of the metagame. We also knew that people were going to be playing it, so we really wanted to tune our version to be strong against the mirror match.
The deck ran an almost identical core package of Ice, Earth, and Lightning cards. It differed with a far more varied spread of Guardian attack actions. The 2 Entangles were a solid 3-cost option with a decent on-hit effect when fused. The 2 Spinal Crushes didn't fit well into the cost curve of the deck, but were able to remove Go Again from opposing Starvo attacks, and were solid into other prominent matchups. The 2 Pulverizes were usually played only in combination with a Fused Awakening for the most back-breaking pivot turns in the game. For defense reactions, Charles ditched the Sink Belows and ran the Red Staunch responses over the Blues, which were perfect for covering up high-power attacks with Dominate in the mirror match. At this point, Starvo was absolutely the talk of the town, though he had yet to be tested on a large scale. But this would change in the upcoming ProQuest Season 1, which ran across 4 weekends from February 19th to March 13th. Over 250 events were held around the world and rewarded winners with an invite to Flesh and Blood's first ever Pro Tour coming in May. With each ProQuest event awarding 6 Living Legend points to the winning hero, over 1,500 points were about to be added to the leaderboard. As Flesh and Blood's newest boogeyman, Starvo was primed to claim his fair share of those points. In the first weekend of 53 ProQuests, Starvo represented a modest 22% of the meta, given all of the hype surrounding him. But when it came to results, there was a different story. Starvo represented 36% of all top 8s, so pretty much every top 8 had an average of 3 Starvos in it. And the chance of one of those Starvos winning the event was 47%. At the end of the first weekend, Starvo had won 25 out of the 53 ProQuests, more than double that of the next best performing hero, Prism.
There was clearly the deck to beat coming out of SCG Con. It had a proactive game plan that was going to play the same into basically every deck in the format and just ask the question, what are you going to do?
I think the Starvo deck is really good though. The chances of hitting his ability is really high with Crown of Seeds and Art of War. So he's definitely going to continue to do good.
He's been smashing it.
We said that it would be a decent deck, honestly.
Yeah, didn't realise it would be that
and I
crazy.
Think
His first dose of Living Legend points was a healthy 150, and there were still 3 more weekends of ProQuests to go. The second weekend was a very similar story. Starvo represented just about the same percentage of the metagame, but had a slightly worse top 8 conversion and win conversion rate. This was most likely due to Prism seeing substantially better results, as she was emerging as the most viable counter to Starvo. Still, Starvo won 26 out of 64 ProQuests in Week 2. Week 3 started to show how the metagame was settling. Starvo saw slightly less representation and win rates as the other contenders like Prism, Viserai, and Chain were adapting to target the deck. But despite their best efforts, Starvo was still the reigning boogeyman. The final weekend saw the same slight downward trend for Starvo, where he won less than 40% of the events for the first time. Prism and Viserai had their best showings yet, but not nearly enough to overtake Starvo in wins.
Bravo Star of the show has been resilient. Yeah, I expect it to be hated out of the meta quite quickly, and we're looking to head into Indianapolis here, where I think that it's still the deck to beat.
Overall, across the ProQuest season, Starvo represented 22% of the meta and a staggering 42% of events won. That was 109 out of 257, and was now sitting at 654 Living Legend points. He had been in players' hands for less than 2 months, and he was already well on his way to 1,000 points. The very next weekend, on March 19th, the ProQuest meta came to a climax at the Calling Indianapolis, the largest event of 2022 at the time, with over 450 players in attendance. As expected, Starvo was the most represented deck, followed closely by Prism and Viserai. After 7 rounds of Swiss on Saturday, players with a record of 5-2 or better qualified for Sunday. Starvo fared quite well on Saturday, representing 41% of the remaining decks after the 7 rounds. After 5 more rounds on Sunday, Starvo had claimed 4 spots in the top 8. On one side of the bracket, previous Calling winner Michael Hamilton on Starvo faced off against Cody Williams on Chain. After a marathon of a game, Michael Hamilton survived Chain's relentless offense and was able to run him out of threats.
There it is, fist bump. What a game. Michael Hamilton holds on for dear life.
In the semifinals, Michael Hamilton faced off against Sam Dando's explosive Briar deck and was able to play defensive and prevent Briar from having any substantial Channel Mount heroic turns.
Dominate, and that's the fist bump, Brian. It was tough work there for Sam Dando in this case.
On the other side of the bracket, Phino Black's atypical Prism deck had taken care of the other Starvos to meet Michael Hamilton in the finals. It was the perfect culmination of the Everfest metagame in one match. The current boogeyman, Starvo, versus the biggest thorn in his side, Prism. Michael Hamilton's Starvo build had deviated far from the aggressive Captain Planet build that had become so popular. Like a true Guardian, this deck was designed to take the defensive by replacing elemental cards with 3-block Guardian attacks and defense reactions. It also had great tech into Prism, with a high density of poppers to counter Phantasm attacks, and lead the charge and time skippers for gaining extra action points to destroy auras.
Michael Hamilton is built different. As a player and as a deck builder, this just does not look like the typical list.
Notably absent from this deck list was Awakening, a card that was universally agreed upon as game-breakingly powerful. But if the game plan was to always be ahead on life, Awakening becomes kind of a useless card.
Whatever player wins this event is going to do a lot to set the metagame heading into that first Pro Tour.
And I think we're almost about ready to go to that first game. It is the finals here at the Calling in Indianapolis. Phino Black, the #1 seed, versus Michael Hamilton, the ultimate Guardian Control master. But here we go, right out of the gate, Phino Black, 2 aura start.
Huge start from Phino.
Right away, time skipper boots.
Yeah, Michael Hamilton not willing to let this go ahead and snowball on him. Getting wide again with that lead, the charge. Going to go ahead and fire off 2 attacks on this turn. We assume going to start with an Autumn's Touch. Look how committed Michael Hamilton is to this plan. It just keeps cleaning up. And I bet we're probably going after that Passing Mirage next.
But here's the clapback we found of an Earth card, and we found a Pulse. It is time to get nasty. 9 Dominate, go again. So here comes Michael Hamilton back into the fray. He's going to respond with that Genesis, and that is a massive piece here. This is a board that he is so happy to have at this life total juncture right here. And Michael Hamilton is looking through his cards to find out what is the best course of action here. So here he comes with the hammer at Haze Bending, and we're about to see why 2 Haze Bendings can be gross.
Yeah, Spectral Shield heading up to 4.
This is coming in as 11 Dominate, go again. But there are 8 Spectral Shields.
This is about cleaning up those Spectral Shields. And again, another situation where Phino looked like he was starting to wrestle control, and Michael Hamilton just has the perfect answer.
Another big stuff. That is the 3rd unmovable.
Unreal how the back and forth has gone every single time. It's like, okay, this person has exactly what they need in this turn. The other person has exactly what they need to answer it. Looks like we have found our 3 elements again, and it's that Pulse of Candlehold. It's going to go ahead and load those Oaken Olds to the top of the deck. Here it is, Flake. Crown of Seeds going to go ahead and draw that top card off the deck. That's an Oaken Old. That's going to go ahead and push through for 11 Dominate. Michael Hamilton firmly in the driver's seat right now. It's just about finding that last fusion and pushing through some dominate damage, and we could have a champion here at the Calling Indianapolis.
Is that a red evergreen?
I believe it is, and that's going to represent 9 dominate from Michael Hamilton. Demands an answer on the part of Pheno Black. We're going to see Pheno Black fall to 1 here. Going to go ahead and make those prismatic shields.
A timely Winter's Bite buys the hand, and he's just...
Yeah, and that is going to do it. Winter's Wail does the last points of damage, and we have our champion. Michael Hamilton takes down the Calling Indianapolis, and you see a massive sigh of relief on his part. What a well-played game.
Michael Hamilton and his innovative deck had earned Starvo his first high-profile victory and 100 Living Legend points. Also happening alongside Day 2 of the Calling Indianapolis was a battle-hardened event with over 300 entrants that also saw Starvo claiming victory in the hands of Yeonji Yang. Starvo ended the weekend having claimed all the Living Legend points available, putting him at 814 points. With the ProQuest season and the Calling Indianapolis over and done with, the time had come for the next banned and restricted announcement from LSS. History had shown that when a newly released hero dominated a metagame, bans were soon to follow. The community had a wide variety of opinions on what they wanted to see in this announcement.
I've heard a lot of different proposals for what could be done.
I would have made Oakenold an Oldheim specialization.
I'd like them to get rid of his Go Again.
I would early retire Starvo for the Pro Tour.
I think the most problematic card, it's between Crown of Seeds and Oakenold.
I would ban Scalata, and then I would ban Crown of Seeds.
I'm only in favor of no changes or an early Living Legend.
Also banned Awakening as a card.
I honestly do not know what they should do, and I'm really glad I do not have to be the one to make that decision.
Everyone had already had enough of the current state of Starvo. On April 5th, it was announced that there would be no changes to Classic Constructed, which sounds crazy at a glance, but this update came with a lot of fine print. The first being that the Everfest competitive season was still in full swing, with 4 Battle Hardens and 1 Calling happening in the next 30 days around the world. These competitors had been preparing for the current metagame, and changing it now would be quite the last-minute change for them. Though the main reason for no changes was that between these events, there were 220 Living Legend points up for grabs, more than enough for Starvo to hit 1,000 points. If he won the Calling Taiwan in at least 3 of the Battle Hardens, he would hit Living Legend, which is why another banned and restricted update was scheduled for May 2nd, where he could potentially leave the format right before the Pro Tour. So, in essence, this was more of a postponement of the banned and restricted announcement. If Starvo won enough of the upcoming events, he would leave the format on May 2nd. This announcement did not sit too well with the community, and it prompted quite a bit of discussion about the state of the metagame, the Living Legend system as a whole, and the difficulties of prepping for ProTour New Jersey.
Seems like the goalposts are shifting and that they're trying to use Living Legend as a way to take care of this without having to actually touch anything on the banned and restricted list, which feels contradictory to what we've sort of heard and seen in the past.
It's unhealthy for a hero to be released and within a few months have the most Living Legend points.
It's real easy to say, legal until May 2nd. Just done.
Completely agree.
I think there will be changes made, just doesn't happen to be right now. And
there is also a lot of variance in the system that it comes down to who guesses the bans correctly. And like that is not what I want the Pro Tour to be testing.
You know, you would assume during a ProQuest season the points would be split, you know, semi-evenly here.
All eyes were on the remaining events leading up to the newly scheduled May 2nd announcement. First on the list was Battle Hardened Krakow, attended by 45 players. Starvo dominated the top 8 and easily claimed 30 more Living Legend points. The next weekend was the first ever Asian Calling, held in Taiwan on April 23rd, attended by 142 players. Data from this event is limited, but after day 1 of Swiss pairings, only one player, Shenzun Luo on Starvo, remained undefeated. After a cut to Sunday and then more Swiss pairings, top 8 consisted of 6 Starvos, 1 Chain, and 1 Viserai. On one side of the bracket, Shenzun Luo battled his way through 2 other Starvos to meet Ye Li Hung on Chain, who had also taken down 2 Starvos on his way to the finals. Unfortunately, this game was unable to come to a natural conclusion. There was a clear instance of cheating by the chain player, which prompted the game to be halted a few turns later. This player was disqualified and not awarded second at the event, resulting in Shenzhen Luo being crowned the Calling Taiwan champion and earning Starvo another 100 living legend points, putting him at 944 points. Also happening at that same event was the 59-person Battle Hardened Taiwan. Starvo was half of the top 8, but Prism was able to deny him another victory. On the other side of the globe, at the 64-person Battle Hardened Madrid, a very similar story played out. It was looking promising for Starvo, but Prism kept him at bay. At this point, Starvo was at 944 points and could not reach 1,000 points by May 2nd. Players were going to be stuck with him for ProTour New Jersey. To the community's relief, LSS didn't wait until May 2nd for the update, but instead immediately made the announcement on April 25th to provide clarity as to what players could expect for ProTour New Jersey. This update saw the removal of 3 cards from the metagame. Awakening was banned outright, to little surprise from the community. It just completely broke the core tenets of the game. If you were winning, you didn't need it, and if you were losing, you played it, and then you were winning, and your opponent couldn't do much about it. This card is often cited as the most powerful individual card ever printed. The second card was Autumn's Touch, which was suspended until Starvo attained Living Legend. There was nothing overpowered or broken about it, but most Starvo decks ran the maximum 9 copies of Autumn's Touch, because they were 3-cost Earth attack actions that blocked for 3, an absolute premium card for Starvo. There were plenty of other Earth cards that could fill these slots, but they would only block for 2, and the blue replacement wouldn't be an attack action. This served as a way to reduce Starvo's defensive capability and the consistency of the hero ability. The final card was Viserai's signature chest equipment, Blood Sheath Skeleta. LSS hypothesized that without Starvo as the top deck, Viserai could quickly turn into the next boogeyman of the format. Similar to Awakening, Skeleta allowed the cost of powerful cards to be heavily discounted, resulting in damage output that other decks couldn't match. The community had their answer. Starvo would still be playable for the first Pro Tour, but not at quite the same power level. He wouldn't be able to rely on Awakening and would have to replace 9 copies of Autumn's Touch with strictly worse Earth cards. He would still certainly be one of the top decks going forward and more than capable of attaining those final Living Legend points soon. Players had 2 weeks to test out these adjustments to the meta before ProTour New Jersey. The day before these changes went into effect, there was the final event of the old meta at the 72-player Battle Hardened Pittsburgh. Starvo claimed 6 top 8 spots and saw Charles Dunn taking down another Battle Hardened with Starvo. Starvo was now heading into Pro Tour weekend with 974 points. When the day arrived on May 13th, it was clear that the best players from around the world still thought that Starvo was the right choice for the Pro Tour.
I do believe we actually have a metagame breakdown, so we can go to that and see what we actually, have here at the Pro Tour.
Starvo is still, still has the fattest piece of the pie.
He was the most represented hero at 37% of the meta, and like clockwork, after 7 rounds on day 1, Starvo's percentage of the meta increased to 42% for the start of the next 7 rounds on day 2. At the conclusion of the 14th round, 3 Starvos were in top 8. Of course, if you've seen my previous video, you know how this ends. Pablo Pintor clutched out the tournament run of a lifetime to claim 200 Living Legend points for Chain. If you haven't watched that video yet, I recommend you go watch it. So Starvo ended the Pro Tour bracket just inches away from reaching Living Legend. But there was still a chance for Starvo to hit 1,000 points on that Pro Tour weekend. Happening simultaneously during the Pro Tour was the open entry Calling New Jersey. This calling was the largest ever Flesh and Blood event at the time, with 782 players registered. Starvo uncharacteristically occupied less than 20% of the meta, partially because many of the best Starvo players were still competing in Day 2 of the Pro Tour. This freed up space for a fairly diverse field of heroes. Unfortunately, there wasn't any coverage of the calling as the stream was dedicated to the more prestigious Pro Tour. Starting on Saturday, after 7 rounds on day 1, Starvo's hold on the meta had grown to 35.6%. After 7 more rounds on Sunday, Starvo claimed his typical 3 spots in top 8. 2 of the Starvo players lost their quarterfinals matches, while Mateusz Sas from Poland overcame Chain and then Breyer to meet Oliver Fye on Prism in the finals. Luckily, the Pro Tour finals and awards ceremony had just concluded and the Calling finals were captured on stream.
We could actually watch Living Legend status be reached. But here it is, Oliver Fye versus Mateusz Sas on Starvo.
Everyone was watching with bated breath to see if the boogeyman that had been terrorizing the format would finally attain Living Legend. Mateusz was running a standard aggressive Starvo build. It ran a high count of element cards and the package of cards to help with the Prism matchup. Oliver Fye started the game off incredibly strong, placing down 2 auras on turn 1. Mateusz was able to keep Prism's aura game plan in check by finding a Starvo activation and using an extra action point from Blink to hammer down 2 auras in 1 turn. With continued Starvo activations, Mateusz was able to keep up the offense, while Oliver was content to cover up damage with defense reactions and place down auras that couldn't be ignored. After trading some damage, a very timely Channel like Frigid was able to slow down Prism's aura placement and prevent damage by taxing her usual 0-cost attacks. After keeping it around for 3 turns and cracking time skippers to clean up 2 auras in 1 turn, Mateusz was ahead on life and Oliver had no auras in play. Mateusz looked to close the game out early with an unfused Okanold and the 1 sneaky pummel in his deck, but Oliver perfectly covered it up and punished Mateusz by quickly stabilizing with an impressive board state. Luckily, Mateusz was able to find his Starvo activations and soon both players were barely clinging to life.
Is he able to push damage here for the 4? Is there a way to dodge that? You're gonna just give it up.
No.
Can't do it. You can't play the Prismatic Shield for 3 when you only have a yellow, and that will push over the edge. And we just watched Starvo reach Living Legend status on stream. A fantastic send-off, picking up a Calling victory.
You are the one responsible for bringing Starvo to Living Legend.
So I heard. I'm really glad that he's gone.
Yeah.
Not really fun to play, but yeah. Sometimes you need to do this.
Mateusz Sas had won the largest Flesh and Blood tournament to date and earned Starvo 100 points, launching him into Living Legend at 1,074 points. The community owed Mateusz a great debt. Starvo was now scheduled to rotate out of Classic Constructed with the release of Uprising on June 24th. Flesh and Blood players could rest easy soon, but they would still have to endure one final competitive season with their boogeyman. ProQuest Season 2 took place immediately after ProTour New Jersey, with some events outside the US actually being held on that same weekend. From May 14th to June 5th, 323 ProQuests were held across 38 different countries, and rewarded winners with an invite to Flesh and Blood's second Pro Tour later that fall in Lille, France. This time around, ProQuests had been adjusted to award 4 instead of 6 Living Legend points, to account for the growing number of events. Knowing that the hero would soon be banned out of the format, and possibly feeling the Starvo fatigue, players did shift off of Starvo for ProQuest Season 2. But at the same time, the data showed he was still the strongest deck, so he settled in at just barely the most represented hero at 16% over the 4 weekends of events. As we have seen so many times before, Starvo consistently made it into top 8s and even more consistently ended up taking the final win. After 4 weeks, Starvo had won 112 events, over a third of all ProQuests, pushing him further into Living Legend than any other hero. And as if he needed any more wins under his belt, Starvo also won the 87-person Battle-Hardened Las Vegas, and the 60-person Battle-Hardened Sydney happening during the Uprising World Premiere weekend, launching him an additional 60 points into Living Legend. June 24th arrived as a glorious day for Flesh and Blood players. A new draft set hit shelves, 3 new characters were entering Classic Constructed, a format veteran was leaving the format, and the hero who had been center stage for the last 142 days was finally having the curtains drawn. he had claimed his throne atop the Living Legend leaderboard with a final score of 1,582, a number that has cemented him as a god amongst mortals. Every trading card game has its own history of dominant decks and infamous metagames, and Flesh and Blood is no exception. The era of Monarch through Everfest has been deemed Flesh and Blood's overpowered era, and Starvo is its poster child. LSS has been quite candid about the circumstances and oversights that resulted in his design.
And I can tell you that legitimately that hero was a tier 2 hero in development.
We have massive compression on our development pipelines from Tales of Aria and Everfest.
The way COVID was treated in New Zealand, not the same COVID was treated in the US. They were not able to interact in person.
You reveal the full house and you get, you know, the go again for freebies, you know, like during the development of Everfest, Briar was not errated and Plunder Run was not banned.
If you've ever tried to do game design or development before, it really does rely on a lot of in-person interaction.
It's just the access to go again is just too free.
You know, to be fair, we were just like a much younger studio as well.
And when it lost to like the 3 best decks, it was like, yeah, he's fine, he's tier 2, that's all good, ship it.
We're not trying to make more Oldhams, not trying to make more Starvos, definitely.
Oh, thank you, please.
You know,
please, no.
We probably crossed some lines there.
And then.
Thankfully, since the Starvo meta, we've seen the game eloquently evolve with controlled power creep, calculated bans, and adjustments to the Living Legends system to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself. So it is with complete confidence that I can say Starvo's story is an anomaly. We will never see another hero come close to his 1,582 points in 142-day speedrun of the Living Legends system. Like I said at the start of the video, Starvo didn't really have a character arc.
People were complaining about Starvo like 3 weeks after it was printed.
I've never heard like the level of like depression and misery that I heard with Star of the Show. Like
Full on lobbying, we have to change this is unreal.
Any game where one player's playing and the other isn't is a bit of a problem. We've seen that in the past with things like Starvo, just, you know.
That's what's making people unhappy, and it's just the feedback is overwhelmingly negative.
Not letting your opponent play at all is pretty boring.
As the Starvo player, playing against other decks was boring as hell.
I hate playing Starvo over Starvo. It's very coin flippy.
It's just not a fun gameplay loop for the opponent, and it's also not fun for the pilot a lot of the times either.
The Starvo player's just hoping they hit the thing, and you're sitting there hoping they don't hit the thing.
It just feels the same when you're getting crippling crushed over and over again.
Like, let's just be honest, right? If we had a ban system instead of a Living Legend, he would have went. Yeah. And we all know it.
He was Flesh and Blood's most unanimously disliked boogeyman, and everyone was happy to see him go. But despite that sentiment, I think we're all secretly a little glad that Starvo exists. Not for the games that we had to endure with him, but for the unique lore he added to the game's history. There's nothing quite like regaling and reminiscing with friends at your local game store about the fabled Star of the Show. At the end of the day, the stories surrounding the game are just as important as the game itself, and no story is quite like his. Thanks for watching.